The Cuyahoga County Council Operations, Intergovernmental Relations, and Public Transportation Committee will come to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Good afternoon, and just as a reminder to all who are watching via in person and on YouTube, that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent. Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Schron. Here. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Conwell and Turner are in attendance.
Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. All right. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, Lou.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm glad to be here today. I can support both Inspector General and the GCRTA here. We have gone through lots of turbulent times, and now it really gets to the opportunity that we can actually do something to revive ourselves. Instead of struggling, we can actually thrive. So I hope both of them will give us fantastic reports to reflect our reality. It's really good to know the truth, and in that case, when we go on, we will have a better solutions getting the resources together. But for GCRTA right now, we need public support because lots of the funding right now GCRTA can have is only a one-time thing. But for public service, to continue serving the public, it has to be constant. It cannot be, we cannot just depend on one-time only fundings here, there. So I really wish that we can all get good information from Ms. Birdson's presentation, and we will know how much we are still lacking and how much we need to kick in. This is very important, because our low-income people, senior people, people with disabilities, homeless people, we all rely on that. So, and I wish we can elevate public service, especially public transit, into a service that not just people need them to use it, it's also people would prefer using them. But to get on that utopia, we have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much to give me this opportunity to have my support shown right here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No one else is signed in.
Thank you. If we could take a moment and take a look at the minutes from the September 21st meeting. For the most part, it was the internal audit. Monica Houston gave testimony. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Have a second?
Second, Sweeney.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing no nays, the minutes are approved. There have been no matters referred to committee, but we do have two very fascinating and interesting presentations today that I think we will all be glad to hear. First of all, we have the Agency of the Inspector General's semi-annual report, and Mark Griffin is here. Thank you for making arrangements by Zoom, special circumstances today, and we were still able to bring this forward, so thank you. And if you would like to give us your presentation, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all to the council persons for the chance to come and speak with you. It's always something that I greatly enjoy. Just to confirm, can you hear me? Is my audio coming through?
Yes.
Great, great, thank you. And I appreciate the special circumstances. Today, a member of my staff tested positive for COVID, and so we wish him the best of recovery. And we have all done the instant test and have tested negative, so that's a good thing. But I do also want to say thank you to our Board of Health and to the Cleveland Public Library, who makes these tests available and very quick in 15 minutes. Very, very impressive. So that's the reason that I can't be in front of you today, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you via Zoom. So let me take a moment and talk a little bit about what happened during the first 6 months of this year. And so I'm going to try to share my screen. And let us see how we do this. Bear with me here for a moment. Okay, so the first half, our first 6 months, of course, are January through June. And this was really peak COVID, where we dealt with several issues at the same time. One was limitations on staffing, but also working remotely, as most of the county did, for better or for worse, reduced the number of complaints and tips that our office got. And so one of the things that we did was we tried to focus on things that we could do to help move the ball forward. And so I'm going to try to move fairly quickly through this because I know that RTA is here and I want to be respectful of your time. But at the same time, I want you to know that I'm always here for questions and comments. And so the speed of moving through these slides is not because I don't want to talk about things, because as you know, I enjoy talking about our office tremendously. So with that in mind, as you know, we had budget cuts to begin with. We were asked to cut our budget 14.6%. And so one of the things that we did was that we froze any open positions and we transitioned 2 employees from full-time to part-time after speaking with them and understanding kind of what they wanted to do in their own careers. That was also an opportunity to reduce our full-time equivalents, but it also meant that we had fewer eyes to protect and promote the public good. So in particular, we had a computer expert, our investigative systems analyst, who we share with the Department of Internal Audit, moved to part-time status. Similarly, we had a first assistant deputy inspector general and case research analysts who left the county as well. And then we had another full-time person transition to part-time. And then that went through the end of June. And so in terms of the budgeting, those positions were left open because we were asked to cut our budget. But then we met with OBM. We asked to be able to fill those positions. And in July, we were told, yes, we could fill those. And we began a process of trying to find great people to fill the shoes of some excellent people who have left. And so we were able to fill those 3 positions in September and October after meeting with OBM. And that has created a little bit of an issue, which I hope that this committee and this council will consider, which is that, above and beyond what was proposed currently, we're looking at the need to kind of go back to what we had originally and what was given to us or proposed to us by fiscal when we decided to fill those positions. That's about $160,000 difference that's there as well. So in thinking about what happened during the first 6 months, it's important to know that we had vacant positions, but those positions have now been filled with some outstanding county employees. But that didn't mean that we stopped our investigations. And just so as part of our commitment to continue our investigations, we did a couple of things, and these are just examples. For example, as we moved into a more technology and remote work, one of the issues became, what has happened to our laptops? And so we did a review of county laptops and found 2 county laptops that were being used for personal use. Those have since been returned. And that's really just, I think, a situation of you take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. But another thing that we did because we were in the middle of COVID was to review emergency purchases and to assure that all of the vendors who had an exemption, a 30-day exemption based upon our emergency declarations, could then also ultimately registered with us and underwent the background checks because we want to make sure that what happened 10 years ago with respect to vendors and to some extent has emerged occasionally doesn't repeat itself. So we went through and verified, and for those who had not registered with us, made sure that they had the background checks for the emergency purchases. In terms of ethics positions, ethics opinions, we continue to move forward and respond as necessary. We looked at misuse of official positions with regard to testimonial statements, but also we regularly get questions about possible improper compensation. And so that was also a set of issues and questions that we had with respect to those. But a primary piece during this period of COVID was to really work on our education and try to be preventative. So, it's not, we want to just be, catching people after things have gone wrong, but we want to move aggressively and try to prevent rather than simply a cure after the fact. And so we completely redid our annual ethics training and have gotten quite good reviews and responses from staff members who appreciate the engaging nature of it, use of media from movies regarding public corruption. That's done well. We've also done complementary ethics training for public officials. We work every year with the Citizens League of Greater Cleveland. And then as we move forward, we're going to have another continuing legal education program, free legal education for ethics for all county attorneys in the hopes of saving both time and money for the county and for county employees. Other things to know during our first half, we continued with our delinquent property tax initiative. As I mentioned, we had some staff turnover that we've had to manage. But then another piece that took up a substantial amount of time was continuing to work with the Ohio Attorney General's office with respect to witness preparation. From my office, we had 5 people subpoenaed as potential witnesses. As it turned out, only Cicely Woods from my office was actually called to the stand. But our report, was actually an important document that was put forward as part of that trial. And in terms of cooperating and working and assisting the Ohio Attorney General's office, that was also something important that we were involved in during the first half. And of course, because of trial delays, that bled over into the second half as well. The assistant to County Prosecutor O'Malley and Treasurer O'Malley on commercial collections for past taxes had a little bit of a dip the first half. Only $620,000 were collected as part of this program that we do with them. But interestingly, that has bumped up, and simply just since July 1st, from July 1st to today, we've collected another 1.2 million. So a lot of variation in there. One possibility might be that some of the delinquent taxpayers that would have paid in the first half actually paid at the end of the year, end of calendar year 2020. And so 1.2 million has been collected just since July 1st, about 9.4 million altogether since the program started. But we want to talk about actually a new issue that we just started to work on at the end of the first period and are moving forward. One of the things that we look at is, how can we save and protect taxpayer dollars? And one of the things that we noticed was that we are not getting lodging taxes from most of the online vacation rentals by owners. So interestingly, Airbnb came to the county during the course of the Republican National Convention and said, look, we want to voluntarily make sure we collect your lodging tax. We want to be consistent with you. And so they reached out. And so we have an agreement with Airbnb where they collect county lodging tax. However, they're the only one who does. And so there are many other vacation rentals by owner and others who have not paid taxes to us. And so we reached out to coordinate with the Treasurer's Office and the Law Department and the Fiscal Office to expand this to try to make sure that taxpayers who are our residents are treated fairly. Because one of the things that happens is that a company like Airbnb, who does the right thing and who is fair, is put at a disadvantage from those who have not reached out to us. So we want to try to even the playing field and help taxpayers at the same time. And so one of the things that I would just bring to this committee's attention is that other cities have done a good job of this. So for example, Portland, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we reached out to other cities and other counties to find out how they did it. And they've had agreements for a number of years. So this is just from the city of Portland, and you can see that they have agreements with a variety, whether it's Expedia, hotels.com, Hotwire, Inc., Orbitz, Priceline, TripAdvisor, those are all paying into Portland. Airbnb, they do it for us. But again, TripAdvisor, Flipkey, Vacasa, HomeAway, Loftium, these are all entities that are doing business in Cuyahoga County or could be doing business in Cuyahoga County where we are not necessarily receiving a lodging tax from them. So as we have done with the prosecutor's office, we are working cooperatively with the fiscal office, the treasurer's office, the law department to try and make sure that the lodging entities that are paying their fair share aren't disadvantaged by some of the big tech companies that do not. Another issue that occurred during the first 6 months was, of course, debarments. As it happened, none rolled off in 2020. At the end of 2020, we have 21 vendors and corporations that are currently debarred, and it looks as though there will be some that will be coming up for debarment. I'm sorry, not this year, but in the first half of 2022. And again, we pursued our driver's license review. Again, it looks as though this is actually having an impact, and there are fewer and fewer county employees who put the county at risk by not having their driver's license or insurance up to date. And so we are only had 8 in the prior cycle that were expired. Only 2 were suspended. And so this is really about half of what we usually see. So that's really a significant improvement. So with that, that is a overview of what we've done in the first 6 months and kind of some of what I can share going forward. We do, of course, have investigations going forward that are still pending, in which I can't comment on at this time. But that is the overview for our first 6 months. And I am delighted to take any comments and questions from council.
Well, thank you. That's fascinating and some new reporting that is also interesting. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councilman Miller, then Councilman Sherman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, to the Inspector General. First, I'd like to thank you for all the work that you do and to keep us on the up and up in terms of ethics and proper government. And I assure you that we take your staffing situation very seriously, and we intend to deal with it. My first question is, you mentioned that you found 2 laptops that were being used for personal use and retrieved them. And my question is whether, other than retrieving the laptops, was there any kind of disciplinary action involved in this?
We referred those matters to Human Resources through the chair to Councilman Miller. And they determined that discipline was not appropriate in those cases. And frankly, I think the view was that we as a county had not done a good job in trying to retrieve those. Having said that, employees should certainly know that county property should not be used for personal gain. But in terms of reviewing the material that was on the laptops, there didn't seem to be anything that was, although they were used for personal matters, they weren't used for things that might be wildly inappropriate, whether it be, political or questionable. So in answer to the councilman's question, there was not discipline impacted or implemented by Human Resources.
Okay, and a second question. You mentioned the assistance to the Fishbowl Project, the commercial collection. Are we doing any residential collection in the same manner or only commercial?
We are not. Our view is we try to be creative in the AIG's office, but we're also limited in terms of our jurisdiction and what we should be doing. And so we do not do any residential assistance with the Fishbowl Project, in part because, one of the roles that we have is the debarment of contractors. And so that brings it a little bit more appropriately, I think, within the realm of the IG's piece. And I think my understanding is that the fishbowl folks are pretty happy with that division of labor. They have not asked us to expand our assistance. If they do, we'll consider it. But I guess I feel more comfortable limiting our efforts there to commercial entities.
And Madam Chair, to the Inspector General, how much money in lodging taxes have we received from Airbnb, and how much additional do you think we could receive if we were able to get the other players to comply?
So we have asked that question, and the response from our tax department is that those numbers are confidential at this point because they're trade secrets. And so, frankly, we don't know. It's my understanding that Airbnb obviously is a very important player, but they are not the majority. They don't have a majority of market share for home shares. So, I would hope that, we have something. Well, I don't know if it's significant, but I do think, every dollar that we find for our taxpayers is a good thing. But the other piece is that I think it's unfair to good companies who pay their taxes to be disadvantaged from others who do not. So I don't have a projection for you at this time, but we are still in the beginning stages of the process. I can tell you that Expedia in the past has taken a difficult line with various government entities, but that the government entities have always eventually prevailed. So, for example, we reached out to Sullivan County, New York, which is in the Catskills, 60,000 employees, or I'm sorry, 60,000 residents of Sullivan County, New York. And Expedia at first didn't want to talk to them at all. But then after, a series of, let's say, unpleasant correspondences, they changed their mind, and now Sullivan County is getting money. So, we are guardedly optimistic that these other entities will realize that they need to pay their fair share of the county lodging tax as well.
Madam Chair, to the Inspector General, final question. There appeared to be a good number of debarments initiated in 2021. Can you talk about why that is and what those debarments are for?
Yeah, they are almost all from the Fishbowl Project. And that's part of our cooperation with the prosecutor's office, which is we send a letter indicating that they're at risk of debarment if they don't pay. And there are companies that are concerned about that because they don't want to be debarred from the county, but also if they're interested in doing any government work for other entities, for other governments around the country, they usually have to report that they've been debarred by Cuyahoga County or any other place. So virtually all of them are related to failure to pay taxes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Inspector General. I think you indicated that there were 2 computers that were found with personal data on it. Does that mean they were doing personal business? Maybe like a for-profit type business? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, they weren't for profit. They were things like personal email accounts, personal photos. And that's why I say HR didn't view them as egregious. There was nothing partisan political. There was nothing like an inappropriate website, that sort of thing.
How many computers do we have in the organization?
I don't know that offhand. And of course, that number changes regularly.
Back of the envelope?
Certainly as we move.
1,000, 2,000?
I would think that would be I would say simply in terms of laptops or surfaces, that's probably pretty close to where we are. Because as we move to remote work because of COVID, the IT department was successful in acquiring a significant number of new laptops.
I guess I find it just shocking that if we have 2,000, just for a pick of the number, and only 2 we found that were used for personal, statistically we would be clearly out of the norm with that. It's almost impossible running a private business to not find people who at lunchtime didn't use it for website checking or doing something else out there. Is this where you're saying that nobody out of the 2,000 devices has used that device ever to click on a personal site or do? It's hard for me to believe that we found only 2 people to not prosecute, but at least to bring an issue of.
Yeah, and let me apologize if I left the impression that we surveyed every single laptop in the county. We did not. We responded to specific reports, but then we also had a very limited survey so far of a particular part of HHS. And so, I think our plan is to look at more as we have time and we have more resources, but we didn't have the personnel available to look at every laptop in the county.
Well, every laptop and every communication, every email belongs to the county. It's our asset. So clearly we should be able to look at anything going through and find out whether it's a business source. If that's how we choose to use our time. I just find it literally almost impossible to believe that there were only two devices out of 2,000 that have been used, because that would actually be contrary to probably any other organization, private or public out there, because people just, whether we like it or not, lunchtime comes and people will click on it, and I'd be willing to bet if you see a show of hands throughout the county, I bet you, if it was done anonymously, you'd find the numbers would be considerably higher than that. But hey, that's, I hope we're using our time not to see whether or not Big Brother is looking at whether or not somebody's used it to check out whether or not there's a weather report on the way home or anything of that nature out there. But because I really think what you were using it for, what we've been using the IG for to do inspection is where we want to see our time and energy. I would hope that we don't have whistleblowers saying, oh, so-and-so used it to look at the weather report in Poughkeepsie or something of that nature. So.
And let me emphasize, and perhaps I misspoke or didn't do a good job of describing what the process was. This was actually an inventory piece of laptops that had not been returned to us, and so it wasn't based upon let's survey the usage and then try to determine what people were looking at. It was a question of where are there laptops that should have been returned and were not. So it was a physical inventory piece.
That piece is obviously 100% our rights to do, and we should recover any piece of equipment that are floating around, even if they're obsolete and need to be destroyed out there. And I would agree with that. Once we got it back in, that should be our objective. Should be just getting the equipment back. It would seem to me out there from that standpoint. On slide number 9, you indicate that there is an assistance to the prosecutor and O'Malley and the treasurer's office, that we've allocated resources and assets, if I'm understanding that slide correctly, in preparation for trial work. And one of the individuals was potentially that you'd help prep for trial work was actually a witness in the case. Is that, if I'm understanding what I thought I heard you say? There were 5?
Yes, but let me try to separate those out a little bit. The trial prep was done for the Ohio Attorney General's office. And so Cicely Woods from my office testified on behalf of the state. Separately, the work on behalf of the county prosecutor and the treasurer related to the tax matters. And so, so in my office, subject to subpoena, I was served with a subpoena. Valisa Turner Howard was served, Cicely Woods, Mark Cutright, and I believe Hitachi Alexander were all, put on the witness list and potential witnesses.
And that was in regards to what Prosecutor O'Malley had initially had as the case and then handed it off to the Ohio Attorney General? Is that what it was, as I understand it?
That's correct.
So he has jurisdiction. Yes. The Ohio Attorney General has jurisdiction over matters that were currently before the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, if I'm understanding correctly?
Yes, I believe that both the county prosecutor and the Ohio Attorney General can prosecute violations of the Ohio Revised Code, and they both have public corruption departments.
But the county prosecutor said, I believe I have potentially a conflict of interest, so I'm going to hand it off, is what I understood the factual pattern to be. And you said you had assets that were in support of whatever that flow, whether it's from Prosecutor O'Malley down to the Attorney General. And you said that was mitigated. I think that we only ended up having one witness out of the 5 that were prepped. Do we still have, and I don't want to go into the background, just teeing this up, as to what matters would be still under investigation, but do we still have assets that are prepared to do what you were preparing those 5 individuals to do as far as testifying going forward, that you are using assets, personnel, time that would affect and impact the budget in regards to the same thing you testified to in regards to slide 9? Is that,
So
you understand
when
the
you
clarity
say
of my question?
asset-
Yeah. Yeah, you would
I'm not
indicate,
exactly sure that I understand, but I think what you're asking me is, are we still devoting staff time to these investigations that had proceeded in previous years?
and with the
answer
possibility they're
your
going to
question-
testify also, with the possibility, as you did with those 5, with the possibility they're going to be testifying at some point.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything going forward. At this time, we are always there to help and assist law enforcement, whether it's the county prosecutor or the Ohio Attorney General. But at this point, my understanding is that their efforts have largely come to a conclusion, at least to the extent that they ask me to be helpful. I would also say that both of those organizations are very discreet in what they do, and so they don't disclose to me everything that they are working on, and nor should they.
Right. I just wasn't sure at what point we became aware of the need to have those 5 assets prepped and where it was taking time away from your work. And so whether or not we are sitting with 5, 6, 8, 10 people preparing for the same conclusion that's taking time away, and do we then need to be budgeting for that to give you more in the way of personnel and assets to cover for that?
I think in terms of testimony, I don't think we need extra budget for that, but I do think that we have filled the positions that we previously had vacant, and we believe that the people who have come on board, and let me be specific about, I was able to hire a Mary Bradley, who is a attorney who spent 20 years with the Department of Labor. She's outstanding. And she's very helpful in our investigations as well as our ethics pieces. I was able to hire Kim Seeley, who many of you know. He was our former interim director of internal audit. And he is exceptionally bright and looking for, trying to find anomalies, looking at anomalies with respect to some of our expenditures. And then Carla Caraway is a research assistant who replaced our prior research assistant. So, we need those positions to continue to kind of go forward and be at the same level that we were 6 months ago, 12 months ago.
Okay, you need those positions just to carry on the work to which the department has been tasked with, but you're not saying you need those positions to be able to cover for what you had alluded to as far as the 5 witnesses in the past going forward, at least if I understood you correct.
That's correct. That's correct. I think that work has come to an end.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Yes, Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hello, Inspector General Griffin. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Councilman.
I get the biggest kick out of you calling it the Fishbowl Project. Did you dub it that?
Of course not. As you know, Councilman, it far predates me, and it goes back to the old days of the county commissioners, where they were in a room with windows. I think it was the first floor, as I recall, and they did great work there. And for some reason, there was a period of time during the transition when that project was no longer going forward, and County Prosecutor O'Malley brought it back. And we're delighted to play a small role, because the numbers that I've shown you are tiny percentages of the success that project has had for the county prosecutor.
Thank you for taking me down memory lane, and I know they do wonderful work there, and I was wondering who officially named it, but now I got it. Just the one question I have is, it's a small one, but the driver's license, it's going down, just because people are like, I need to get my driver's license because it was too much, or is there an effort to get people's attention because it is a serious issue if they're driving a county vehicle and they happen to have an unfortunate situation occur and no driver's license would put us at risk.
So I think it's a mix of issues. I think some of it is that our efforts are paying off a little bit. But the other piece that I would say is that during COVID, there was an extension of time for renewal of driver's licenses. So we had fewer and fewer people were driving as well during that period of time. So I think it's a mix of things. And I think that we'll have to look again at this next 6-month period to see what the change is and to see, what factors have contributed to it. But we don't want lawsuits against the county, and we don't want people driving without valid driver's licenses. So we're gonna continue to do that.
And last question on the same topic, just, is it a mandatory every 6 months they ask, or is it random like a drug test, or how is it investigated?
So we ask every employee on an annual basis to provide their driver's license number. Every employee who drives in the course of county business, and that could be driving a county vehicle, or it could be driving a personal vehicle on county business. In either of those cases, we risk liability. And so we then have an invoice or a program, a software program from Progressive Insurance that runs those those driver's licenses against the records of the State Bureau of Motor Vehicles and their driving records as well. So in answer to your question, they're surveyed once a year and asked to confirm whether they drive or don't drive. And then twice a year, we run the program through Progressive to determine if there are any violations.
I love it. So thank you very much for the education, and keep up the good work. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Only because you just triggered my interest. It's probably not one of us here that doesn't drive down to council meetings where we aren't taking a constituent call or doing something on our cell phone or of course we're doing hands-free, driving the car, and where we're driving. Is that an insured occurrence? Because we're clearly not frolicking. We're clearly on county business, and we're headed here to do county business. And I don't recall anything in regards to driving and the insurance issues out there. So should something happen, God forbid.
So my understanding is that when you are on your way to work at the beginning or on your way back from work at the end, there's something called the Portal to Portal Act, right, which deals with time, and that those are not considered to be county time. However, once you clock in, and if you're then driving to a meeting, whether it's downtown or something, while you are on county time, then you could be the county could be liable. But it's my understanding that the time spent arriving to work or returning from work to home is not considered to be county time.
Unlike county employees, that if they're working at home, we're supposed to be paying them for that time. We should be paying them for compensating if they're on the clock and they work an hour at home. That should be a comp time that we're actually paying them. None of us are on the clock, and we are on 24/7 is the way I have always looked at this job. If we receive a constituent call, it is not the same as what you referred to on that. So I would love to at least get a reading on that, as long as we've got this dialogue open as to whether or not it's something we should be turning our driver's license in, because I don't recall being part of that, because it would seem to me if we're driving, taking a constituent telephone call, which we do, I'm sure everybody here has done that, or called the office while we're on the way here, that is, and I can tell you the guys in the back are always saying, "You're coming? Are you coming?" It's 3 minutes or 5 minutes on the way here. So that would, to me, would constitute time. So I would want to get a reading on that. God forbid anything ever happened and we have an automobile accident. I'd be willing to bet that a clever plaintiff's attorney will actually try to find county government coverage. So we want to make sure we have insurance for that.
Just on that point, Madam Chair.
Yes, go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Councilman.
And just my understanding, it's you said to work and from work doesn't count. It's in the line of work that we're in, and I think it could be the first stop we have would start you're working, and then the last stop is when you come home. It may not be from the physical building, is my understanding from previous interaction with this particular topic. I'm good. I just wanted to share that.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so for
historically what,
example, if you're going to,
yeah.
if
That's
you're going to a
historically,
breakfast meeting, that
correct,
might,
sorry. That's historically what happens with sales personnel, but this is a different, I don't know that we fall into that same category, the reading it,
I just threw it out as my perspective.
I know, that's historically what we've done and looked at for sales personnel, when they get in the car, when they first stop, but I don't know that we ever have a stop. We never have a stop, we never have a start in what we do.
And you know,
You ever taken a
Inspector,
call at home? I believe you probably have.
I'm just going with, it's basically for the mileage tracking, if you have mileage. The first stop doesn't count, the last stop doesn't, but you can count all the other mileage in my days on council. So that's just that's the premise I'm working off of. So I don't want to get in too big a debate. I know you're going to do your homework. I just thought I'd throw that out from my perspective. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, Councilman Schron, for letting me jump in on that.
and as you know, Inspector, this is music to my ears because I raised the license concern way back in the beginning of my chairing of this committee, making sure that those county employees who are driving and with your reporting showed that they either expired or suspended, that we were accountable for those, not just list them, but what's going on with them. And did you go back to the director to make sure that after we realized that it was suspended or expired, was that remedied? And we have come a long way from the early days of discussing this, and I certainly do appreciate you including it on your report and being very specific about it.
Madam Chair, if I may, the numbers may seem small, except that one accident could put the
Yes.
county at liability for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so even though the numbers are not great, the impact can be. And so I just want to say thank you to you for your leadership on this issue.
Yep, that only takes one, and then it would open our eyes to correct the problem, but that's after the fact. So I'm glad we're being proactive on this. I do have one question on your report under this category, as long as we're on it. It says disposition, no issue, no discipline, didn't drive for county or get reimbursement while license was not valid, and there was 5. What if are any of these, even though they're not getting reimbursement, they may just go to a quick meeting and come back and never claim that they had that mileage? Is something like that, if they're not on a valid license and they're not getting reimbursement, wouldn't that still make us liable?
Yes, it could.
So
It's something that makes it challenging for us to investigate. If it's an expired license and they haven't put in any time or they haven't put in any mileage, it's difficult for us to then go back and say, last month, were you driving in the course of county business? So that's a challenge for us.
Well, I appreciate you staying on top of this. The HR review in progress, you show 6. Is that something you'll go back and ask those directors if this has been remedied?
We will, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I have a couple more questions real quick. On the larger report for the first half of this year on page 16, you have under investigations, poor or improper management practices, and the vast majority, 10 out of 17, is in that category. Can you expand upon what was poor or improper management practices that created that category to be so large?
Yeah, well, so many of these come from the jail, frankly.
Okay.
And so there are complaints about, many of them are complaints about improper management there. And so sometimes we'll investigate, or oftentimes we work with Bob Corey to refer those to him. We have to make sort of a discretionary decision about whether these are really IG investigations or not. And so that's what I would tell you about that. The significant majority of those are from our county jail.
If I may, on page 18, where it says investigations initiated by department, I see that the larger category, one of them is sheriff. So I would think that, is that part of the jail as to what you're talking about?
It is, yes.
Okay, the largest though, which is 6 out of, I'm not sure how many, come from the Department of Development. Can you expand upon that?
Yes. So first of all, 5 years ago when I started this, there was a significant issue with our failure to collect development loans that was financially very, very significant, in the 60 to 70 to $80 million range. What we're getting now with respect to development are that there are contractors who have not been paid by development in what the contractors believe is a timely or untimely manner. And so sometimes they reach out to us and say, development hasn't paid us. And so many of these are because of those 6, I believe 4 are because the contractor didn't do a good job. And in those cases, we say, hey, we can't help you. We're going to support the Department of Development because if we're paying you county money and development says that, you haven't performed adequately, we support development on those issues. The other 2, though, are sometimes we're slow in paying our contractors. And all of these are they are relatively small businesses. These are not your big contractors. And so the people who call us need the money. And so in those cases, we try to expedite, and a call from my office sometimes will make something that falls through the cracks go to the top and they get paid. So my recollection is that 4 of those were issues where the Office of Development disagreed with the contractor, and that 2 of them, the contractor then got paid.
All right, thank you for that explanation. It just seemed to jump out at the page and wanted to get clarification on that. One final, on page 10 of your report, for the average person spends more than 3 times that amount on just 1 gallon of gasoline, justifying your budget. I think that you're shortchanging yourself because the price of gas is higher than 3 times 89 cents.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes. I think we were looking at the regular gas of $3.15 a gallon in June of 2021, and as all of us know, when we go to the gas pump, it's not there anymore. So,
right. Just thought I would say you're worth more than that. All right. Is there any other questions from the? No. Looks like we're good, Inspector. Thank you very much for your overview. Really do appreciate it. It was very informative. We'll speak to you again on the second half of 2021.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yep. All right. Thank you. We will move on to our next speaker. And certainly we are very pleased to have the CEO of the Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, Gctra, CEO India Birdson. So, Birdsong, thank you for coming this morning. We are very anxious to hear your overview, and it's a pleasure to meet you in your somewhat new capacity. So take it from there and give us an overview of what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman and members of the council. As mentioned, my name is India Birdsong. I have been here for 2 years now. I started in September of 2019. So if you subtract the pandemic, I'm 6 months in.
There you go.
I am pleased to be able to make your acquaintance in person. We are in the middle of the pandemic, so hopefully we can emerge victoriously. My purpose in coming to you today at the request of Ms. Baker is to be able to give you a little bit of an update on where we are as far as the RTA and how we serve the region. As I talk through this, of course, I'll have slides behind me, but again, this is to give a bird's eye view. I am aware of the time constraint, so I will try to go as quickly as I can, but of course, feel free to stop me at your pleasure, and I'll be sure to answer any questions you may have.
If we can, let's try to let the presentation go through its entirety and then go back, so jot down your questions as we go. That way I think we can
Thank you.
Be more efficient in what we do.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So I did come here from Nashville, Tennessee. Just to give you a little bit of information about myself, I did serve at We Go Public Transit. It was rebranded during my time there. We also underwent a tax referendum, which I know has been on the tongues of those in Cleveland for a while, and that's been one of the topics of conversation when I first started here. Before that, I did serve for about 10 years at CTA, Chicago Transit Authority, and through different roles in that capacity as well, both operational planning and the like. So a lot of my experience has been through different regions, and it's nice to be able to come back to the Midwest. I will move forward. That's just the facts at a glance. We have had an increase in our overall operating budget as of late, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about that later regarding the additional funding as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are upwards of about 2,300 employees now when you include all of the unionized employees and the administrative. Our unionized force is about 75% of our overall workforce, if not 80. And we do have two different unions that we work with. One is the Amalgamated Transit Union that handles our operators and maintenance employees. And we do have the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, as we do have an internal transit police force comprised of about 75 officers. And we are hiring for about 20 more. Just to give you a little bit of information about our mission and vision, we have recently revamped our mission and vision statements. Previously, if you're familiar with RTA, we had a mission statement that was very technical in the past, and that had served us very well for upwards of 20 or 30 years. And it was very much safe, reliable, clean, on time, sort of your regular tenets of transportation. Those are very much still in effect. However, the conversation that I had with our team was, why do we come to work? It's really important to be able to think we're going to work toward and strive toward giving you more than just the basic tenets of transportation. If we're only going to deliver on safe, clean, reliable, then we're basically saying we're going to give you our mediocrity. And I wanted us to think about, why are we here, so that we can work toward being a more engaged stakeholder in the community and actually work toward economic development as well as mobility solutions at a higher level. The vision also is new, leading the delivery of safe and creative mobility solutions and community connections. And you'll see that as a thread throughout my presentation. And we're also trying to be very intentional about sitting at the table. We want to become more than just a bus and train network. We also want to be part of the conversation when it comes to economic development and community investment. Success outcomes, we are looking at 4. These are the main tenets of our success as we move forward. There are 4 primary strategic goals. The first, of course, customer experience. How do you feel when you ride our buses and trains? Do you feel safe? Do you feel that this is a comfortable experience? And then also community value. What are we actually bringing to the community? Are we connecting people to the right locations? Are we giving them access to actual resources? Or do we need to revamp what we're doing? Financial sustainability. Any company worth its salt has to be able to be in the black, not in the red. So we want to make sure that we can actually get into debt defeasance. I'll go into that in a little bit. We've actually done a pretty good job of that, which is unprecedented in transportation industry. And also employee growth. Of course, that's workforce development, training and development programs. We want to make sure we're on top of our game that way as well. So we do talk about the pandemic. It's almost impossible to ignore. And because of that, I wanted to give you a quick update on RTA and where we stand. As of October, we were at 267 cases that were reported of infections at RTA. Now, you've got to also think about that we are about 2,300 employees, the majority of which are public-facing every day. And when you think about that, we've done pretty well. As with most agencies in the world, really, the height and the spikes happen between the winter months that we're in right now. And because of that, we actually have included an incentive program for our employees, and we actually are getting people's copy of their vaccination cards to come in so that we can understand how we need to operate in the case that there is a national mandate coming down. And let me also note, out of that 260-odd number, we've got about 95% that are back to work with no issues, healthy. We also, to support our initiative, have created a community outreach immunity vaccination vehicle, or bus. And this actually is a mobile vehicle that you can go, hop on, no appointment necessary, and get your vaccination. So it gives all variants of the shots, so the J&J, the Pfizer, Moderna, and also booster, as well as flu shots. And we have that circulating through our districts. That's what we call our operating garages and facilities, as well as our main office building here down the street in downtown Cleveland. This is a partnership. Again, you'll hear that over and over again. A partnership with the Ohio Department of Public Health and as well as Care Alliance, which actually has partnered with us to distribute the shot as well as staff it so that we can actually increase and bolster our numbers. We also wanted to talk about workforce development. I wanted to give you a little bit of information on the Job Hub. You'll hear that everyone is hiring and it's difficult to get people to come to work sometimes. Because of that, we're not any different than anyone else. However, we want to be able to have our approach be a little different. We have what's called a Job Hub partnership, and you'll see the emblems and the logos of the companies that we're working with on the left-hand side there. This is really our effort through our HR department and our training division to be able to work with recruiting new employees. And it also provides pathways in low-income neighborhoods to be able to have individuals sign on to RTA, so to speak, and be able to create a path for economic wealth through our positions available. This also reduces barriers to the job market. And these are really just a partnership with those continuing education such as Tri-C and the community colleges in order to get people in the workforce. And it starts with not only just the folks that are operating and cleaning the vehicles, but also branches out into different areas that are included in our legal department. We have a transit force, we have an engineering division, planning division. I mean, I could go on, and we have vacancies in all of them. So we appreciate the opportunity to grow our talent as well as be able to do national searches. So we do a little bit of both. There has been a lot of questions, and I would imagine that you all will appreciate this, of conversations about first and last mile. And usually that is the connectivity between the end of the line for our services and our network to the front door of a business. So for example, Solon and Strongsville and a lot of those particular areas have requested services that get to their manufacturing sites and their administrative buildings because perhaps there is a gap of a couple miles or even a couple blocks to be able to transport their workers from our bus door to their job site. And because of that, we actually put our heads together and we came up with a micro-mobility pilot program. And actually the doors closed, so to speak, on that this Friday. It is a pilot program that's been out there for about a month or two to be able to advertise and give cities as well as job opportunities and job employers an opportunity to have a match program. So for example, if you have a manufacturing site and you're having a problem with that first last mile, we will work with you to identify the issue, to work toward a scheduling solution, and provide the operator vehicle on a pilot program basis of 6 months to a year to be able to create a shuttle to go between your door and our service. We match funding-wise, and we have up to $600,000 available for that use. So hopefully we'll be able to get a couple of bids that come in and proposals that come in and work with those agencies. If that service is successful at the end of the pilot, we will work to incorporate that and absorb that into our bus network and make it a permanent solution. So we want to make sure that we can guarantee the ridership prior to absorbing it because it is a financial cost. And we have to make sure that that ridership is there for the Federal Transit Administration. So the answer to that is to start it with a pilot, make sure that we communicate correctly with the training and administration from those job hubs, and make sure that we can get the shifts right and the connections right before we absorb it permanently. So we look forward to that, and hopefully I'll have a good update for you if I am invited back at some point. The Next Gen, if you have not heard of this, shame on us. Next Gen is our redesign for the service development. That's our bus network. This is the first time it's been done, I want to say, in 30 to 40 years, so within the history of the agency. It is our attempt at redesigning our bus network. What we do is if you think about Tetris or Jenga, we kind of move the pieces around and are able to redistribute our bus network so that we can streamline our services. We actually launched this over the summer June 13th was the start of it. We had a free week of service in order to advocate and push for it. We actually had upwards of 40,000 new riders that actually took advantage of that. We had a lot of community priorities that were involved in the decision-making in this process. Basically, we went toward a frequent or a expansion network. That was the question. Do you want more frequent ridership or service, or do you want better coverage? Of course, everyone wants both. So we had to be able to work toward that, which was okay. And we distributed the routes, and you'll see a little bit of the detail in the slide there. But basically, we reduced the connection. So if you typically had to take 3 or 4 buses to get to your location or your job, now you maybe take 1 or 2. So our goal was also if you had to increase your frequency. So if before your route only operated every 60 minutes, now it might be every 30. If it was every 20, now it's every 10. So we're getting toward that goal. In my experience, the transit-oriented cities where it works, like your New York cities and your Chicagos and the like, where people don't think twice about hopping on the transit versus hopping in their car, you have to make it better than your car. That's tough, especially because you don't have the challenges here for parking and congestion. They're not quite as challenging as you would expect in some of those cities. So we have to make your trip faster and more comfortable. That is our mission. We are a public entity, but we have to start thinking like a private in order to be competitive before we go to the ballot. And I could talk to you forever about that, but I'll save you a little bit of that and go to our ridership slide here. This just gives you a snapshot. Again, we are a victim of COVID like everybody else, so you will see a significant decrease and decline in ridership. The good side of this is that we have retained our commitment to making sure that we provide service akin to what we did in pre-COVID timeframe. So what that means is basically we're operating currently at 93% of pre-COVID levels. So we've only slashed 7% of service. We only went down to 85% at the very height of the COVID. We did that because, again, you've got to think that was pre-next gen, pre-service redesign. So if you only have a service operating 45 to 60 minutes, if you slash it, now you're looking at an hour and a half, and that's just not acceptable for Cleveland. So what we did is we made sure that we maintained our service, we maintained our operating force, we utilized the funds that came down from CURSA and the American Rescue Act and all of those subsidy programs and put it back into our service. So we have had no layoffs, no furloughs. We have retained our service, and we also have made sure that we have disinfected our services and maintained a safe environment. So right now we're operating probably at 65% of normal ridership. So our fare collection is about 65%. So we hope that gets back up into the 70s and the 80s. Things are inching along. We're probably seeing about a 10% increase every quarter in ridership, which is a lot better than it sounds. A lot of our competitors are still in the 30s and the 40s as far as the ridership. So for us to be in the 60s is pretty good, and we'll strive to become better on that as well. Passenger fares, here you see a little bit of information on that as to what I spoke of before. We also have a marketing program out that's pretty aggressive. You Drive Us. We tried to get a little kitschy with that, and basically what we want to say is you spoke and we heard you and we listened. So it really just kind of goes out to explain the good things that we're doing amidst all of the pandemic and so on and so forth. Free Wi-Fi is just an example of making the service more attractive. We actually have enacted that on all of our vehicles as well as stations. That was to also help a lot of the kids that are riding our service that may not have homework hotspots at home. And that was to also help them through the pandemic as well as make it a little easier for those that are heading into work. We also have looked at our service and our costs associated with that, and we've reduced the all-day pass price by 50%. To some of us, it may not sound like a lot, but for that individual that is going check to check, it makes a big difference. And we also, again, have done the next gen and are looking at our COVID protocols. We also are looking at our fare collection, which I'll go into in a couple minutes. Wi-Fi, as I mentioned before. And positive media coverage. Again, this is just a recap of some of the positive impressions and that we've had over the last 18 months. month of Mary. It's really just our way of giving back to the customers. It will run November 15th through the 23rd via radio, social media, and RTA-owned assets, such as the side of the vehicles, the cars that are inside. It's really just to be able to give holiday gift cards and 4 packs of all-day passes. This is something that is really a drop in the bucket when it comes to the pricing that goes along with it. Again, we have an overall operating budget of around $300 million or more, and this is really just a small thank you to our customers as we get into the holiday season. The holiday vehicles do return. You might have seen our holiday train. We also have added a holiday trolley, and that will emerge at the holiday lighting on Public Square on Saturday, November 27th. Commuter Advantage, this might be something that might spark interest from the council today. Wanted to make sure you were aware of the Commuter Advantage program. This is also our effort in getting the ridership back. This is a pre-tax incentive program that we are pushing out to not only the county, but also to our public and private partners to be able to have businesses take a look and see what would incentivize people to take public transit. And this is really helpful when you get into someone who is could take public transit, but may not because of the cost. The convenience is there. A lot of folks just don't want to buy a pass every day. And so when you look at the actual incentivized program from their employer to have a pre-tax dollar program where they get a monthly pass, this is probably the program for you. So we actually are bolstering this and pushing this a lot more. We're having a lot of interest in this from customers that may not have looked at RTA in recent years, and we're more than happy to talk with the county about that if you so choose. I mentioned fare collection before. We are ending the useful life of our fare collection process and our fare collection equipment. I have both the blessing and the curse of being here at a time where a lot of our equipment has reached the end of its useful life. That's including our buses, our trains, and of course our fare collection system as well. This is the software. This is the equipment that takes your money, so to speak, when you want to pay that $250 to ride. This is a really good opportunity. I look at this as an opportunity to engage our IT areas, to engage our operational areas, and to be able to think about the community aspect as far as how do we go about taking a fare. You might have heard a lot of the communication about transit police and how do you engage that, and the red line and so on and so forth. This is a technology solution that we can get to. There's also fare capping that might be involved if you're not familiar with that term. That enables riders to buy passes in installments so that you can actually incentivize someone once they hit a certain level where they actually stay at that level and then continue to ride through the end of the month. There's a lot of ways that other agencies and other cities are doing this. And to be quite honest, we have to catch up. We have to be able to catch up on the technology front, and this is our golden opportunity. So we actually have already produced an RFI, request for information, and we will be launching an RFP and or sole source, depending on how we decide to go, for a new equipment and software program in 2022 and 2023. So we'll come back to you with information on that, and I do expect that to be able to push us into the 21st century, so to speak, and catch up. Speaking about replacing the old with the new, we do have some new vehicles, and I'll speed through this in a bit. New Healthline fleet, these are also the new vehicles. You'll see them tooling around town. Most of our vehicles have a 12-year life cycle. They are supposed to be replaced at that time. Some of ours go upwards of 14 years, so we want to make sure that we get in there and replace those as quickly as possible. You'll also see our rail cars. You have heard this, I would imagine, on the news and so on and so forth. Our rail cars are almost 40 years old. That is almost unheard of when you get into legacy systems such as ours. I have worked with several agencies that have older cars such as that, and we are beyond the point in Cleveland where we can repair them and maintain them. We need to get into replacement. So at this point, that is a $300 million price tag to replace all of our light and heavy rail. We are the only provider of light and heavy rail in the state. And that's an asset that was created during the Carnegie and during the Rockefeller timeframes, and we have to be able to maintain that in order for us to be a competitor when it comes to getting people back into the city, and also getting folks to be employed here as well. So we have identified more than half of that in funding. We've worked really diligently over the last few years to make sure that we're knocking down the doors at DC and also in Columbus. And we've identified, I believe it's around 189.4 million so far. And we've also been able to add that from our own coffers on an annualized basis to speed that up. We expect to be able to go through this process. We're in the middle of procurement now, and we expect to have the new cars on the street in 2025. It sounds like a long time, but it's not like buying a car. In order to buy a rail vehicle, you're looking at a 2 to 3 year lead time for design and manufacturing. For a bus, it's typically 12 to 18 months. I am a little nerdy on that respect. I do enjoy those kind of procurements. It's just buying a vehicle on steroids, pretty much. That's a little bit more information, pretty much what I just mentioned about the rail car replacement. Waterline Front Bridge Rehab. Just wanted to be able to give you a little bit of update on some capital programs we have going on. The Waterline Bridge is also in need of repair, and we actually have suspended service on that probably for the next 2 years as we work to repair that. We have advised our partners, including the Cleveland Browns. They do understand what we're doing is for safety purposes, and the cost behind that repair is about $6 million. So in order to make sure that we have those things ready for service, we have to make sure we do the work now. Once we get this kind of capital expenditures behind us, we can move forward with a product that Cleveland would be proud. Redline Greenway, if you've heard of this, this is a fantastic celebration really of not only just the greenway space that we have, but the transit component as well. And this brings in your trail systems as well as your bike ped pathways. And this was actually opened up this year in May. So this was one of the major programs that we did connect with and also completed on time and on budget. We also have done the 79th Street Station, otherwise known as the Opportunity Corridor. This is a key station. We have a plan for that. This is the final key station. It began in the early 1990s and now came to completion. You'll see Freddie Collier there, who was very integral in this from the city, and we're very proud of that completion. I did want to touch on transit police before I left you today. Transit police is something that is somewhat of a controversial topic when it comes to policing and safety of our system. As I mentioned before, we do have an internal transit police force, which works in cooperation and collaboration, with the city. We have talked about and will institute a civilian oversight review board. This is something that would be new for the RTA. This is an additional step to ensure that we have equity and fairness when it comes to any discipline that comes down as a result of any misconduct of our transit police. We are anticipating starting this up in third quarter of next year. It will be a mixed board that includes some RTA, but also external bodies as well. And then we also are looking at an ambassador program. This goes back to the fare collection that I mentioned before. This has been something that I think is really important to make sure that we not only gain the trust of our riders, but also we keep an eye on what we're providing. This ambassador program will start with about 10 employees and we'll ramp up from there to include a social worker component as well to be able to work toward the homeless issue that we also tend to encounter as public transit. A lot of our partners do as well. We're also looking to do this in mid-2022. We are working on the policy for this right now, and this has been endorsed by our board. So really excited to be able to do this. We've looked at other agencies and utilized a couple of other agencies as examples. I believe Denver RTD was another example that has a great program. As I wrap it up today, One RTA. This is, again, another advertising kind of internal media that we're pushing toward. We have to be a unified agency to be able to understand that, our actions do impact our residents. And with that, we have a racial equity commitment, DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion. You'll hear that a lot. We did encounter some interesting conversations among our own staff to be able to be open to that kind of conversation, to make sure that we have programs and hiring that is equitable and inclusive of those in the Cleveland area. So we do have this push out there. We Wear the Mask Community Art Project. There's a slew of things that we're doing, and we're really excited about that. So with that, I believe that brings me to the Q&A if you have any questions. I know that was quite a bit.
That was a wonderful overview, very interesting, a lot packed in there. I'm sure we have some questions, so Councilman Schron, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Great report. I really, it is actually very refreshing to hear a community organization that looks like it's got a business bias towards what you're trying to do, which is, I think, a good thing, because ultimately there's a customer at the end of any business transaction. And so my hat's off to you from looking at it from the customer point of view, customer centric, which is, I think, what wins the day ultimately. Some tough questions, though, unfortunately. I assume you're having a challenge finding people. It's like everybody. Everybody has a challenge finding people. What percentage of your workforce currently right now is vaccinated?
Very good question. We actually, again, think 2,300 employees. We have gotten our kind of get out this push to get your card copy.
Sure.
Right now, we've got 981 cards in so far. We just started that in September 24th, and we added the incentivized $500 on top of that a week ago. So if that gives you any indication, we were at 400 cards that were handed in. We offered the 500, and all of a sudden it jumped to 980. So we are offering that through December 31 because we're in cold and flu season, to make sure that we get people to go out and get that shot, or either take the card out of their pocket, so that we are aware of how to move forward should a mandate come forward. If we have to go through weekly testing, for example, we need to be able to make the business decision based on how many people actually don't have the shot, instead of a guesstimate and go into panic mode. So ideally, we would be able to come back. I have done a little research in other areas of the country, and I would say the good agencies, so to speak, that have good rates are somewhere between 70 and 80%. I have come across the industry not competitors, but our collaborators, right, in different areas that are 90 and 95%. A lot of that depends on the politics of the area and also the makeup of their system. So we are hopefully getting to better numbers, but we're currently about 980 that we know of out of 2,300. I would imagine that number would probably double, if not triple, before the end of December.
Sorry, can't triple, because that
not
that's
triple,
bigger than your
but
entire workforce.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Sorry,
but I'd probably say,
if I'm following your math,
yeah.
It might be able to double, but I even find that hard to believe. Not because of anything you're doing, but just the sheer demographics out there. Right now, you're at about 35%.
Yeah, 35 to 40,
which is really on the low side. Not saying anything you're doing wrong. It's just the reality of what it is.
And it may mirror the actual state as well. So I would imagine that whatever the state numbers are, we probably would be pretty close to that.
State's a little bit north of that, but not a whole lot. And some of that comes down to workforce ideology too, that you're going to have. Have you done any kind of back of the envelope analysis of how many you think are going to say, nope, I don't want a vaccine? It's usually going to be in the 15 to 25% range, I think you're going to find.
We have. We've tried to break it down by area. So, for example, transit police, on average, have a propensity not to get the shot. And then we also have maintenance, which has kind of expressed that same concern. Our operators are a mixed bag. We have a little bit of both. We have found that some folks have it and have not admitted having it, and other folks are very much proponents for it. So it really spans the gamut. I would imagine, if I could put my best guess forward, if we're looking at 2,300 employees, I would imagine 1,500 to 1,800 would probably be about where we land.
Okay, so 1,500 with 2,300, that's 800. So that's pretty close to that 20% number that I was saying.
Yep.
If you end up with a 20% delta on this thing, you're a business woman. I can tell that you and I we're gonna click. If you do the pure math that we're looking at 50 to 80 million people are going to need daily testing or weekly testing. There just will not be enough tests in the United States. There's absolutely no way that if this thing becomes the law, that means 50 million tests this week, 50 million tests next week, 50 million tests the week after that. The system is not capable of doing that. What is you're a planner, I can tell that too. What is your plan or your thoughts? They don't want the test, they don't want the vaccine, and you need to have testing. Is there do you even see a solution? Because I don't see a solution in my own life, because there's just no way some stuff comes out of Washington D.C. and
It's a tough.
it hadn't even thought out. Sadly, when you take 50 million tests every week, the system is not producing 50 million tests on a weekly basis out there.
You're absolutely right. And those are the questions. You're spot on. I do ask a lot of the same questions that you're asking, which is good. Lets me know I'm on the right track. In our preliminary conversations, the first thing that I wanted us to do as an agency is to find out who's testing, who's offering the test, and what their availability is. When the mandate first came down, it was kind of this widespread panic, and we've got to do it tomorrow. When we talked to our FTA, our federal partners, the idea for transit is there an exemption in that? We're not considered a private company, but we're always quasi-government. The short answer to your question is we would have to first figure out how many folks have to be tested, if they have to be tested, and then do we have to bear that cost as an agency, or would that be handed back to the customer, so to speak, or the employee? So I think that's part of the debate and the conversation of, are we required to actually cover that employee to get tested, or do they have to do that on their own accord? And another thing that we thought about was the operational component. So when you talk about RTA, most people think about administrative employees, but if you think the reverse, it's the people who are out there operating the vehicles. Those employees have to be on time and have to be in the seat at a certain time to make it go. If there is a weekly testing that we have to think about, then that employee would have to do that in advance and be able to scan in that card or that proof to us. We got to think about that as well. So the idea is do we pay for it? We hadn't made that decision as of yet because we're trying to figure out what that would cost and how would we be able to do that. We'd probably have to be able to get that proof in probably 24 hours before the start of their shift to make sure they can get there on time. Then we get into the conversation of how do we handle service and how do we keep the levels up if you have a contingent of the workforce that's not vaccinated and did not get that proof of negative testing in time. So that goes all the way back to us trying to do everything we can now to push people to show us their card and to get that vaccination so that we don't end up in that situation. There are a lot of questions as, you know, when we have a new hire, do we require them to have the shot? And those are a lot of the questions that are going out there now. To be quite frank with you, a lot of our partners in different cities all have varying policies, and we're working on ours. The idea is that we would be able to do everything in our power to make sure that that employee would be able to come to work. We don't want to get into the idea of the politics. We want to just make sure that everyone's safe and we have a negative workforce. So we would be able to partner. I'll give you an example, and I know I'm a little long-winded here, is when we got into the testing, we have forehead testing every day. When I go into the office, I have to stand in front like I do here and scan, right? So we went through a couple different iterations of that. We have barriers to be able to protect our operators, all that kind of thing. But the idea is we'd be able to talk about testing. Our hope is to get away from that or either be able to handle that small subset of the population and be able to positively say that our workforce is negative or has their shot. So that's where the bus comes into play. That's where the incentive comes into play. But we are working on a policy, and at the end of the day, if we have to be able to test folks, we are creating those partnerships with Care Alliance, with the Metro Health, with the different Case Westerns and all of those other medical sort of entities to be able to set that up and create MOUs with those partners where we would be at the top of the list to be able to test if we have to do that.
Yeah, it's not just a temperature test. It's going to be the antigen test, which is about $20 to $25 a test times your 800 employees times,
Our hope is that
you're looking at a quick $1 million without a doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Our hope is that it probably would be passed on to the customer or to the employee, and that alone might incentivize folks to go the other way and get the shot if that becomes a qualification of employment.
Yeah, and sadly, the alternative is they'll go find a job someplace else, because if they go to find a place that's under 100 employees,
Yeah,
all this doesn't apply.
it's hard to do, yeah. But currently, we do not have to have the mandate for public transit, so we are operating.
That was as of last night. We
Yeah.
saw that, I'm sure we're reading the same
A moving
publications.
target, yeah,
Yeah, the
absolutely.
Fifth Circuit actually.
I may,
But let me just finish. The problem
that
is,
same thought?
what's that?
on that same thought.
Yeah, the problem is the disruption. If you don't have that 20% of the workforce,
Right.
those are drivers, those are those are maintenance people, those are all that component, and all of a sudden your system starts to break down pretty quickly. And then when your system breaks down, that means the employer who's expecting that person to show up, their system breaks down.
Exactly.
That means that the Health and Human Services that is now going to have to step up.
The cycle.
The multiplier effect is not even, I don't think it's been factored in, that your one driver, what its impact all the way down, the ripple effect is just astronomical. It's scary as to how devastating this could be, because that one driver, we've all heard, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost, and the horse was lost, and the battle was lost.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think our
have other
staff
questions.
starting to
Go
know
ahead, but if you want to, if it's on this same point.
Right.
Thanks.
Before we move on, I think what also complicates this is that we have unknown variables. Some feel they have natural immunity because they've already had the COVID and feel that their immunity is already there, and it's uncertain as to how long that lasts, how powerful it is. So we've got that piece that is evolving. We also have where the vaccines wear off. So now we're talking about
booster.
boosters. So then now you're measuring not only those that have gotten vaccinated, but now you're entering a new evolution of boosters to reinforce what was already taken if they had already taken the 2 vaccinations. So, I don't see a beginning and end that we're successful, that we had everyone vaccinated in a perfect world. I see this as evolving as to deciding whether or not natural immunity is in fact something that is plausible and can be measured. And then secondly, if these vaccinations wear off, how does the booster play into the ongoing employment of an employee? So I just wanted to tag onto that.
Just to piggyback on your comment, Madam Chairwoman,
Yes.
it is not evolving, sadly, because it's not being recognized. I just got back from Europe, and they recognize vaccines, they recognize testing, and they recognize natural immunity. And the only one of the 3 characters that's actually cheering is the person with natural immunity, cheering that they have actually been able to demonstrate it.
They have it.
Sadly, in the United States, that third category is not even a recognized category. But it's going to take people like yourself, because you're very well respected, to take this message to our congresswomen and men, and to take our message to the state, to take it to all those folks who are making this, to let them know that there is a third category. And I'm a person of faith, and I believe that this body that we are given is actually a natural tool that is going to that we should be considering this out there. It should, and I'm not trying to get political. It's just a natural thing out there, and your voice is going to be very strong, because that one driver is going to ripple all the way through that whole system as far as its impact.
Absolutely.
So
it can be detrimental.
Speak up.
No problem.
Send the message, because I'll be right there with you. I'll be part of the choir with you.
No problem.
And if successful, it manages your problem. It manages the amount of money for testing. It manages.
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
The healthcare
suddenly,
Yeah.
right.
Because you know that you've got 15-20% of your workforce has already had COVID. You've
Right.
already told us that.
Yeah,
They probably
absolutely.
have natural immunity. Why should they be
Perhaps.
tested? Why should they be vaccinated if they're probably in a better condition. So I would be cheering with you. If you want to go to Washington, D.C., I'll be with you. We'll buy airline tickets and we'll testify anybody out there in regards to this. And I hope the media is listening, because this is exactly the message we need to get out there.
Well, I've made plenty of trips to DC for other things, and I think that at the end of the day, I want our staff to remain safe, because our
safety is number one.
Yeah. The city depends on, we're the backbone of being able to get people, to your point, to healthcare, to jobs, to daycare, to grocery store. And without our TA, there's a huge part of the community that just may be immobilized.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get to a solution.
And we know the Israeli study showed that natural immunity was actually, I think, 15 to 20 times better than the vaccine for actually treatment. I think they had the largest study in the entire world was done in Israel, and they identified the natural immunity of those who had COVID were actually in better shape. So I'm happy to, whatever you want to do, I'll be with you all the way, because I'm, as you can tell, I know a little bit about it. I've been actively involved in this out there. Switching gears to another topic.
Yes.
I noticed that your brand new vehicles, you indicated they're 12 years is what you anticipate the useful life, and you're probably going to get 15 to 20 years, knowing what kind of a preserver of our assets
We
would
try.
be.
Mm-hmm.
Those vehicles, having toured your facility, and it's magnificent. Your new, it's not new anymore. It's like 3 or 4 years old. We toured it with Leadership Cleveland.
I am a Leadership Clevelandite, class of 2022.
Well,
currently.
it's the second best class.
There you go. I'll take that.
having been, as you know.
I'll take that until I graduate.
Having known that's what every class brags about, being the best class. But your facility is spectacular. The one over in East Cleveland, I think.
Yes,
right in East
Wood Hill
Cleveland.
probably. Yeah.
And there you bring the buses home every night. You fill them up with CNG gas, and if you have committed to 12 years worth of natural gas vehicles, it tells me that you have committed that this is a clean fuel. This is a fuel that you are looking for the future, and it's probably a 12 to 15-year commitment that you just have indicated that here.
Absolutely.
You please make sure everybody knows that that's not, it's a fossil fuel, by the way.
Yes.
And it is a fuel that's clean, and you're not going to switch, more than likely, to electric buses anytime soon out there, because the CNGS vehicles that you went and created this huge hub, this huge filling station, huge washing station is already in place, and let them know that that's part of a solution. It's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
But it's part of any time you look at a total energy solution. So
We definitely, and kudos to you and your definite understanding of the fuel kind of consumption conversation. We have a mix right now. We have CNG, absolutely, and that had been a major push at RTA. So we do have a large commitment to that. We also have diesel hybrids, and we are looking at electric only because the industry is moving toward that. However, it will take several years to be able to transfer over. I did come from agencies that had electric, a small contingent of it. The major things I see with electric, it's a great opportunity for future use. However, there are some tweaks that have to be made in order to make it compete with the CNG and with the diesel. They're wonderful when you can use them and you know how far you can go. The idea is being able to plug them in and be able to have either overhead catenary systems or at grade, charging in the ground to make sure that you can recharge. If we do not commit to it wholeheartedly as a country, for example, then you run out of gas, so to speak, when you're operating. A lot of the electrified vehicles that you'll see in different cities have been put on kind of almost like the trolleys.
yeah.
Because they're shorter.
We're actually
kind of
going back full circle to the trolleys that used to run down the streets here.
Exactly. So what we'll have to do is really rely upon the network to be able to charge when you're either mid-route or at your end destination. But we'll get there as an industry. But right now we're just kind of inching toward it. So we'll probably be able to commit to the electrified vehicle consumption in the next few years, but it will not take over the CNG because we've made that commitment. But we will start that. I would like to see some advancements made in electrified vehicles. There's a lot of benefits to it, but we also have to talk about the training for our maintenance staff, for example, that you're basically throwing away those wrenches and that grease to be able to look for your network systems, and you almost become software engineers. So there's a big educational system that goes along with that, but we'll get to it. There's a lot of, I believe in California, it starts from the west, northeast, if you think about it that way. And there have been certain mandates where future, I'm talking 2030, 2035, 2045, where all future purchases must be electrified vehicles. We're not there yet, but we'll be able to keep the pace and kind of see from a bird's eye of the improvements that are made before we invest in it. But the CNG, we're heavily invested now.
And it's a clean fuel. It is. In
It
relationship to what we had 25, 30, 40 years ago, it's so clean comparatively. And the burn rate is what, up in the close to the 90 plus, 97, 90%?
It's pretty high.
98% efficiency out of that. I mean,
And
anybody
there's
who
certain
actually
areas
looked
that
at
can
an
do it.
electric vehicle knows that it's not even close to those numbers by the time they believe. There's an expectation that it is, but when you actually change track the entire fuel process that it takes to get that electric charge in there, there's a lot of consumption that's not close to the CNG efficiency out there. So thank you. Congratulations on making that commitment too.
Thank you.
All set? All right. Yes, and I think, yes, Councilman Miller, I know you've been waiting.
Just a comment about the COVID-19 discussion, which is that the discussion is entirely too individual based. The biggest problem is that with everything that we've done, we seem to be in another surge going on, and the question is, how do we get to the point where we have enough with vaccination, natural immunity, social distancing, and everything combined that we close to eliminate the virus? And we have to ask ourselves, what do we have to do to make that happen? Because we're not there yet. So that's just my comment on that for what it's worth. And regarding the electric buses, I think we have to move in that direction as quickly as possible. The natural gas is only a less climate destructive vehicle than the coal burning or other earlier vehicles, and so I think we have to move quickly in that transition.
If I may, the EV or the electrified vehicles is part of our 10-year strategic plan. So we do have intention to be able to test that theory at RTA. We currently have the diesel hybrid, as I mentioned, and the CNG, of course, but the EV is the next step in being able to kind of keep up with technology. So we do plan to be able to test that theory over the next few years. But as I mentioned, we want to make sure that we can get the kinks out. The idea is that the industry is going toward that, but they haven't gotten there quite yet. But most agencies have a smattering of the EV vehicle fleet. I've seen most have anywhere from 5 to 10 vehicles. So ideally, we would be able to test it out on a small fleet of ours as well. But we have to think about the infrastructure that goes along with it for the charging stations to make sure it's a success for RTA.
Certainly, there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done, and currently, the question of, well, where does the electricity come from in the first place is a valid one, but hopefully we're moving in the right direction on that, and I think 10 to 15 years from now, our electricity sourcing mix is going to look a whole lot different than it does today. It's already quite a bit different than what it was 10 years ago. So my second question is about the fare collection system. Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate a wholesale change in the way that we collect fares, or is it going to be more like we're going to add some new options along with this is a very hands-on practical question. When I go to the RTA station, am I still going to buy a pass from the machine in the way that I always have, or is that going to radically change?
I would love to say that it's going to radically change. I think that there's going to be components to our current system that will always, will likely continue because you do have that unbanked portion of the society which may not have a banking card or even a banking account and may rely on cash transaction, for example. We have to remember that the majority of our ridership is low to mid income, so we have to make sure that we also encompass that in our decision making. However, it is my intention to be able to push the technology at RTA so that we don't fall behind. So to answer your question, I would look to ensure that we have different purchasing options. So for example, if you're currently buying a transit pass, you would go to one of our TVMs or our transit vending machines and put your money in by the card or Tower City and talk to a live person. We will be able to move toward using your phone to use toward almost like you would buy something on Amazon, if you think about it that way, and being able to load your card electronically and through technology instead of having to physically go to see someone to do it in person or either having to physically go to a TVM to do that. That capability may still exist at a smaller scale or at a more strategic scale, but we want to make sure to add on the capability of being able to tap and go. When you hop on a vehicle, for example, being able to load, being able to show your scanning code that you've already purchased your travel option. We also are looking at the idea of regionalism. That's something that's come up in a lot of conversations. You'll hear that through NOACA, for example. You'll hear that through conversations with Lake Tran, with Geauga County, and so on and so forth, to be able to make our system work together. We do find that a lot of our ridership not only takes RTA, but they transfer and they take Lake Tran, for example, to be able to have the second leg of their journey. They may, take, for example, and I'm just throwing this out there, Megabus. They may take our perceived competitors, right, Lyft and Uber before the pandemic. We've got to make sure that we can have a mobility solution that works beyond RTA scope. So in a perfect world, I would love to be able to come back and say, we have an option where you can not only download your RTA trip for $250, but you can also take the Bird or the scooter. You can take the e-scooter that's down the street and be able to look on there and load that in as well so that you don't have to fumble and figure out how to swipe your card again. Those kind of connections are ideal when you get into the trailways, when you get into the bike paths, when you get into different mobility options so that you can take RTA in addition to another kind of mobility, and we become more of a mobility solution, not just a bus and train. So that's what we're looking to do.
So, Director, some of this technology is not user-friendly, so please pay very careful
Absolutely.
attention to how this actually works for your average person that may not be at the high end on technical skills.
Absolutely. I myself am sometimes challenged in that regard, and so if I can pass it, a lot of people can, but I'll definitely keep that in mind.
And final question is whether you see any fiscal changes needing to be made, and by that I'm talking about things like changes in service levels, changes in fares, or putting any tax measures on the ballot.
Very great questions. I'll attack that in probably three different ways. So the first would be the fiscal outlook for our company, and I do say company instead of authority because I want us to think with that in mind. I'll give an example. The debt defeasance is what I alluded to earlier, but didn't get a chance to go into. So I'll use this opportunity. With all of the funding that has come down through CURSA and the American Rescue, we had certain rules that were attributed to those dollars. So those, for example, could be used as reimbursable operational funding. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't use it for capital and the like. So what we did was we used it for that, and then we found ourselves with a little bit of a nest egg. We also, at the same vein, touted a $500 million capital backlog in projects. So that could be the bridges, for example, the waterfront and our rail cars and so on and so forth. This is something that we always hear from ridership as well. They want to be safe. They want better lighting. They want to, make sure they're comfortable and they can have trust. So what we did was we actually utilized a portion of that nest egg to be put toward debt defeasance. That's something we had not done before historically, and we essentially were able to save $3 million every year for the next 9 years to make sure that we can pay down that debt. So it essentially saved us around $14 million over time, and that's something that we've done recently. We also are investing back into our capital expenditures through our preventative maintenance budget. As far as the fares go, we have done a back of the envelope assessment because people have asked me, I think the first week I got here, can we make it free? And I wanted to make sure we had some numbers to that instead of just a gut reaction. We looked at it, and this is, again, a very high level, but it would cost us around $40 million annually to make up the difference in making the system free. And that, again, that's taking into example the fare collection system, the contracts that we have that would have to expire, as well as just our fares that we get in.
Are there any major systems doing that?
Good question. At the time, there were none. There was one in Kansas City, Missouri, I believe, that was looking toward that, and they had done it on a trial basis. At this point, I'm not sure if they sustained that because of COVID. With a lot of that, even through COVID, a lot of our partners in the state had made the services free for a little bit of time. I declined that for RTA with concurrence from our board. Those cities that had made it free for a small amount of time had to reverse it and started to charge people because they couldn't sustain it. Again, we are a business, and the way that I want to run our agency is that we put value in that $250, and I want to make sure that we have guaranteed funding through the state and through other areas of income before we would determine of making the system free. So to give you a really quick answer, we'd have to have some guaranteed sales tax coming back to us to ensure that we could do without that $250 a ride. And that comprises of about 17% of our budget. Most fare box revenue in most agencies does not exceed 45%. I know that was a lot, but I hope it answered your question.
So, are you thinking about putting anything on the ballot, and if so, for what purpose?
That's something I would definitely have to speak with our board about. My recommendation at the current moment is not to do anything for at least the next, say, 2 to 3 years, because I want to make sure that we get our product up to spec so that if we go to the ballot and we're in competition with EMS and fire and teachers and things that make a lot of sense that we need, we also need to make sure we're coming with a product that's not at the end of its useful life, that's not behind in technology. So if I can get these things replaced, get these systems up and running and the technology there, and get us into a space where we're in the black for the next 3 to 4 years, then I think we'd be in a good space to entertain a sales tax referendum. So I'd say probably 2 to 3 years would be my best guess to do the homework and then come back to the ballot with the blessing of our board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Madam CEO. I know you're getting tired. I said some
That's okay.
very brief ones. Just on my colleague Dale Miller, every time he goes to the Indians game, he takes the Rapid with his wife. So he's a rider, and it's pretty cool to watch him do that for the majority of his life. Number 2, on your taxing, for the tax increase or possible tax increase, I love it. Through the chair, it's the brand. You improve the brand. Right now, it's kind of, it's moving along. It's like what you talked about, clean, fresh, and your excitement and your professional subject matter expert shows through. I have just 2 very specific questions. You talked about more routes and better connectivity or whatever. How's the on time? That's always a question because you can go on your phone nowadays, and I should take the bus a lot more than I do.
That's okay.
And
We'll get you there.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The more it gets sexier, it's going to be wow.
That's true. That's true.
And that's when you ask for your tax thing.
Our The on-time performance, very good question. That's my operational brain that I ask that same question a lot. We are actually doing very well operationally. We're probably about 85% to 90 on time. If you separate out our paratransit, which is our vehicle wheelchair accessibility kind of routing, we're probably 90 to 95%, if not better. But a lot of that is because the ridership has gone down. And then you've got the next gen service adjustment on top of that. So we're actually doing better than we would have done without COVID because our ridership is less and we're not picking up quite as many people. But to that regard, it gives us an opportunity to tweak the system to make sure we maintain that. So our goal is to make sure that we maintain the 85 to 90% or better after COVID as well.
And through the chair, that just helps increase the brand.
Absolutely. And if
Right now, it's like, from my perspective,
Yeah.
they're still running a little bit.
right.
But once everybody knows about it, it's going to be like, oh, wow, I can do this.
Absolutely. And if I could add our train on-time performance, that is typically an issue when it comes into how many trains we've got to hold in because they're not operational because of their age. So once we get to replace that fleet as well, and we're also working on track maintenance at the same time. So straightening out the curve. If you've ever been on a train anywhere in the United States and you get into a slow zone and you just want to pull your hair out because you're not moving. The goal is that you've got to be able to move no matter what. So we're utilizing the time right now with low ridership to do all of our capital so that we have least impact to the customers. And then also our paratransit, if I could give a quick example, we have a really great director of paratransit that came on board within a week of my hire. Give you an example, our response rate for calls was 30 minutes when I first came on board. We're down to under 2 minutes now for a response rate for our call center.
This is pretty hilarious. This is the first time I got dinged by I'm talking. That's
Oh,
talking. It's kind of funny. I just heard it. Three
it.
very brief ones. Any interest
If you
in
can,
bringing?
we're getting close to our ending time at 5 o'clock.
Okay. I'll just
Go
very
ahead,
brief.
but just, yeah.
Community circulators, that was thing in the past. We like those.
I have heard that.
What's one seat stop or whatever in your presentation? What's that?
The one seat.
One of your, I'll get to it later.
Okay.
I'll talk to you. And the last thing is,
The reduced transfers, probably, the one seat ride.
the one seat ride. What does that mean?
That's a streamlining of our services as a result of our next gen service.
Sounds good. And I never knew there was a hard stop for committees. And lastly, with the review board,
Yes.
it's just a topic that is rather live in the city of Cleveland on different entities. Can you tell me how it's made up and what the appointing authority is?
Sure. I'll be very quick. We're working through the policy on that right now. We just got approval from our board about a month ago to go ahead and get the green light to get that started. We expect to be able to have a review board that's comprised of anywhere between 6 and 8 people, probably on the odd number, 7 or 9. We are looking to have 2 or 3 individuals from RTA and then appointed by myself, all of the individuals. They will report directly to me as CEO, and we would have the remainder of the committee of external parties. So, for example, that could be someone from the county, the city.
Appointed by you
Yes, it would be agreed by our board, but it would be appointed by myself.
and not confirmed by the board.
No.
The board's going to say, Madam CEO, you appoint it, manage it, and let's go. It's a little bit different than
Yeah.
the issue 24 that passed in the city of Cleveland. So
Absolutely.
they'll probably be talking about it because it's the same topic.
Absolutely. And we're in the draft stages of all of this, but that's our goal, and we have presented that to the board. So, of course, we'll have concurrence from them as we move forward, but the idea is to be able to start that in the third quarter of 2022 so that we can set it up and move forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to my colleagues, I owe everyone 3 minutes of your time.
Thank you very much. Your questions are always very good. We appreciate it. You're a wonder. Any other questions from those on the council? It doesn't look like it. As you can see, there are, lots of questions and curiosity of what it is that you do. We're out of time today, but your pilot program for the microtransit project, I'd like to hear more about that next time we come back.
Absolutely.
What else was there on here? The seeking of the competitive grant, you have $189 million now and I know that you want to raise 300.
Yes.
So that is quite a challenge yet, to raise another 200 million to
We've got another 3 years to do it before the cars get out there.
go. And also your safety ambassadors. Is that, just quickly, is that new hires or?
Yes.
New hires.
New hires, we're looking to hire 10 within the coming months. Our goal is to be able to get that posted by the end of the year and make those offers by the end of the first quarter 2022, train them up in the second quarter of 2022, and have them out on the street by August of 2022, and come back to the board with update on how that's been operating in the winter of 2022. I am a bit of a planner.
That sounds like it. Well, thank you. I know all of us thank you for your time today. And this is, after 5 years, my last time chairing this committee. I've moved on to a different committee to chair. But Councilman Sweeney will be here for, and I'm encouraging, and it sounds like you will, bring you back.
I look forward to it.
After we have had some time to accomplish some of your goals, after you have had that time to accomplish. And we really enjoyed hearing from you today. So thank you for coming, and if there's no other questions, I think we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, we have a miscellaneous additional. Oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Thank you for your leadership.
Oh, well,
Gave you a high bar to achieve, and I'll try to
I have,
at least meet it.
I have high confidence you will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
India,
We are adjourned.
years on county